live. So welcome back to Upturned Table. And for the holidays, we're exploring the Trudvang setting, the Drakar och Demoner setting that was translated into English as Trudvang Chronicles. And it was our first taste of one of the settings before Free League released Dragonbane, which was their version of that game. So this is something a little fun. This is the first expansion, Stormlands, that was released as another slipcase box set. There were two books. One was the Stormlands source book, and one was Snowsaga. Snowsaga was the adventure that we played in the Trudvang Legends board game in the core set. So that big book of sagas is basically this a modified version of Snowsaga. So I thought tonight we would read through some of the narrative and setting that kind of sets the stage for what was going on and what exactly we were doing, because the game itself didn't have a lot of text, didn't have a lot of narrative and explanation. We were just kind of doing things and exploring the continent. Before we start, I want to show you. This is another map that was released with the. There were several maps with each expansion that they released, and I like this kind of monochromatic nation map. It shows the country boundaries, not the cities, but the country boundaries. So this is the Stormlands, and this is where this source book is set and where we begin our adventure for the Snowsaga story. But I like it because it's not a straight overhead. It's got some more topography. You can really get a sense of the mountains, like the Troll's Tooth cutting, here, and you can see the elevation of things and how few mountains are on Soj, and just where the larger mountain ranges lie. So I thought this was a nice version of that. And we'll get with the Elf expansion, we'll get a bigger map of the archipelago in the south. And for the Dwarven expansion, we'll see all of the underground world of Muspelheim, the connected cities, and most of them have fallen to ruin, but the connected cities and strongholds of the dwarves. So I thought we'd start with that. And if you're very good and you survive all of this Trudvang, I completely forgot about this, but I did get the 5e conversion for Trudvang. So that may be a little bit of a clue, or we might see some hints of what Dragonbane might try to do rules-wise and stats-wise with this game, because this game had its own unique system with a lot of adventure points and character points and things. There was a lot of point spends, I think action points as well, for doing things. It's not incredibly playable. It was its own kind of bespoke system for the game. But I think the setting is what we're mostly interested in. So we'll skip through some of the rules and setup for the actual campaign, and we'll just focus on the story. But yes, I do have, and also I figured out that's why the name change. So Command was going to release the board game as Trudvang Adventures, but that is what they used for the 5e conversion. So there would have been a little bit of product confusion. So that's why it got the name change. So many things changed with that board game in its production life. But that's why we were playing Trudvang Legends, because Adventures is a whole nother thing. All right, so let's start with Snowsaga. And as you can see, it's the same sort of glossy hardbound book that they released for all of their expansions. So there were 4 in total before they stopped and kind of sold the rights to Command. There was the core set with the initial core books. The Stormlands expansion was the second one. I believe Muspelheim was the third, and then the Seeds of the Vanir was the fourth, the Elves. So it covers quite a bit. It covers a lot of the setting. I think there's still more that they could have done, and we may see that someday, because that may have been in various states of completedness before they stopped publishing. But yeah, let's take a look at Snowsaga. So this was the story that we played in the core of the Trudvang Legends Adventure Boardgame. And, there was a quick note here, too. The Fimbulsvinter was the term that they used. That's the thing that we were trying to prevent. That was kind of the climax of that story. And it is kind of one of the first events, or kind of early precursor of Ragnarok. So it was, the end of the world where we're fighting to resist. And again, gorgeous Paul Bonner art within, as well as other supporting Alvaro Tapia and some other nice artist work as well. It starts with the prophecies. So this was kind of the foundation. So there's 26 of these short verse prophecies of, what is coming, what will happen, and what that means. So let's just start with this opening paragraph for Snowsaga, and then we'll jump to some of the character and setting. All right. Snowsaga. He pulled the arrow out of the dead body and studied the black surface in wonder. The arrow looked like any other, but its surface was covered in intricate patterns, possessing an almost hypnotic power. Something had roused him from his dreamless slumber. He pulled his mantle closer around him. The winter had hit without warning or mercy. He was cold, and little did he know this was merely the beginning of a long and brutal season. So this is a campaign that begins with the kind of starting adventure that came in the core set, Wildheart. So in Wildheart, the party receives the Snowsaga, and then that's where we pick up from here, similar to the story of the board game, if you remember that. So let's continue with kind of our main antagonist. All right, so here he is. So in the adventure, one of the party is kind of secretly selected by the game master as the Child of Light, whereas whoever held the Snowsaga at the end of the board game was the Child of Light. So this is our antagonist. Bloodaga, the Child of Darkness. Ever since he was a child, something evil and malicious has hung over him. It forced its way into his young heart like a wedge, constantly competing for the older frost giant's attention, had driven him to insane deeds, to say the least. For those who knew him, he had been given the name Bloodaga, which means he of bloody hair. In his excitement, he had first believed that this was a reference to those he had slain and the bravery he had shown whenever death had knocked at his door. With time, he had come to realize that it was because of his constant bloodlust, even amongst his own people, and that the other frost giants viewed him and his misdeeds with contempt. After brutally killing both of his parents, he was cast out of the clan with a darkened heart, shrouded by his ominous deeds. He then made his way further and further north. After years of roving the northernmost and ultimately inhospitable mountains, searching for more victims to slay, he encountered the Snow Queen, the first creature ever to treat him with respect. She promised him a place in the community and a throne by her side. He just had to find the man she was searching for, and Bloodaga's days as an outcast would be over. Indeed, he would show the others the powers he possessed. In the short time during which he knelt at her feet and pledged his eternal allegiance, she had bestowed upon him both power and forest trolls as servants. So Bloodaga the giant has come to shake the world to its core, when he, against all odds, found Snowsaga in Wildheart and brought it to the black ice. Bloodaga is cruel and temperamental. He is egotistical and destructive, but also uses his cunning to accomplish his goals. For years, Bloodaga drifted, lonely with no purpose than to kill and terrorize. After meeting the Snow Queen, he pledged his life to serving her and vowed to find Kurjanti, the elf she was searching for, and the stone that he guarded, Snowsaga. Bludaga's only loyalty lies with the Snow Queen, and he does everything in his power to fulfill her every wish. When he left the clan of the Hurmtasirs, he spent years wandering the north, with the cold wind as his only companion. He even ended up as a slave to dwarves, and the wounds from the white-hot irons bitterly burnt his body. So great was his hate for his captors that it engulfed his heart, like the snowstorm around a stone. Hunted and persecuted, hurt and bitter, Bludaga had fled his worst tormentors. For years he had ventured further and further north. Finally, he reached the land he had only ever thought existed in the dreams of giants. It was the land of the black ice. Endlessly vast and wind-swept plains of ice, black as coal, and a chill so awful that with every breath his lungs burned like ovens. The ice was as dark as the night, and the hailstorm so merciless that it slashed large gashes in the frost giant's tough and weathered skin. At last he had thought that the terrifying and piercing screams were the wind, but through continuous snowfalls and punishing winter storms, it was her voice he had heard, smooth as velvet, and forgiving. Her voice crept its way into his worn and broken heart, chilled by evil and malice, the words caressing his hardened mind and singing through his blood. She whispered that he would be hers, and she promised him that which he had always dreamt of, eternal love. "Give me the Snowsaga," she said, "and I will give you all the things you never had. Get me Snowsaga, and I will love you tirelessly." She whispered in his mind. With her dark, divine powers guiding him, he violently searched, and with deceit, promises, and threats, he had finally found the thing she craved. When he was beyond hope, and his will almost abandoned him, he finally found Snowsaga in the enchanted forest of Wildheart. Now, with it in his possession, he had revived the ancient cult, as a preparation for the projects of his queen, she who had promised him so much. As Bludaga wandered over the windswept plains, from the barren great ice plains, he brought with him the black boulder, a huge piece of the black ice. The ice cult gradually began to amass new followers, and today boasts 1 in 10 of the Wildlanders as devotees and worshippers of the Snow Queen. The cult's foremost stronghold is the northwestern reaches of the Wildland. The black ice whispers, spare none, neither rich nor poor, old or young, all can succumb to her whispers, something that the player characters may bitterly experience. It is the Snow Queen's whispers emitting from the black boulder Bludaga carried with him that makes her followers so reckless, lacking both rhyme and reason. All who make contact with the black ice hear the beckoning, tempting whispers, making them easy prey for the Snow Queen's influence. The Snow Queen and the black ice are one and the same entity, brought forth from its ruthless heart, and wherever there is black ice, the Snow Queen reigns. It's almost been a year since Bludaga awoke the ice cult. The hordes of people have since joined its sacrificial followers. The leader of the cult is the man known as Ise. No one outside of the cult's inner circle knows his true identity. Bludaga has always had a hard life. Even as a child, he was not spared. Since being cast out from his clan for his misdeeds, he has been on the move, spreading horror and terror wherever he goes. He was briefly held prisoner at Glintham, where the dwarves tortured him and made him work the mines. Great luck and unusually had craftsmanship by the dwarves, who had forged the chains that bound him and allowed him to escape his captors, but not before exacting considerable vengeance on his tormentors. A small band of dwarves, led by the great warrior Grum Druvik, has vowed to bring Blodaga's head to Giltheim. Blodaga is constantly surrounding himself with forest trolls. The journey to the darkness. Sometimes it is easier to turn a blind eye to that which is obvious and choose to see the simplest truth for the lie that it is. Prophets and soothsayers have spoken in dreams, and the darkest corners of the subconscious whispers have been heard. Wise men have buried the very shadows of their lives in cryptic scriptures, searching in their loneliness without ever seeing the connection, never to understand. Secrets have been forever lost to the world, not even understood by the gods. And yet the answer has always been out there. The road to it has been simple, the connection clear to the one who knows how to look for them. Just as a coin only ever has two sides, there is only ever the truth or the lie. The entity. When the power center imploded, incomprehensible powers were released, rushing forth over the island in the sea like a maelstrom, tearing down the enormous land masses until all that remained was a vast, bottomless black hole of magical current. The current was corrupt, ripping reality apart in a descending spiral of antimatter and nothingness. Flashes of lightning and glowing magma sprung forth from its center, and anything that it touched was obliterated. For 10,000 years, the storm raged in the cursed place before it was finally settled. But the calm was deceptive. This was merely the beginning of something. Something in the maelstrom had awoken from its slumber, having gained a consciousness. Evil had gotten a glimpse of the light of our world. Our world. At the beginning of time, magical threads of reality were woven together in a steady pattern of energy, linking our world and others. A power seemingly beyond dimensions. However, the creation was not perfect. Small aberrations would at times appear in the magical weave, irreparable mistakes which corrupted the flow of Vintner, with awful consequences for its surroundings. Our tale begins with precisely such a defect. A rift occurred, just as two threads of reality were about to cross, causing them to sever, damaging the power center so much that the very nerve center imploded, creating a negative charged current. A maelstrom to other dimensions opened up like a black hole, swallowing everything in its path. The power center, born of chaos, had emerged in the world of order. Unable to coexist with the maelstrom, the power center was about to be obliterated, but by the rule of order, which worked to preserve the world as it should be, repairing all that was broken. At first, all went well, and the powers of order believed that they had won, but at the last moment, something went wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. The entity which awoke was never meant to exist. It was trapped in the void, beyond consciousness and dreams, beyond time and space, beyond eternity itself. The entity was a principle, an antithetical reaction to creation itself. It yearned to return to the chaos over which it had once reigned, from which everything had originally sprung forth. Eons' worth of collected power have now been released at once when the power center imploded, an event which birthed a thought of what could be, but really should not exist. That was enough to rouse the evil that had slumbered in the void. The maelstrom lay, now essentially a portal, like a gaping wound into our world. The consequences of all that had happened were incomprehensible, and could just barely be grasped. The infection brought on by the maelstrom reflected only a fraction of the true power which lurked beneath its surface, and the pandemonium with the entity's full power was capable of producing if roused. This would mean the end of everything in existence, and would mark the beginning of a new era, a frightening time. The location of where the entity's infinite source of evil is hidden has been lost to history. Many of those wise men and women who have tried to find its dark whirlpool of hate, the name of the place where the entity's evil heart dwells, has survived since time immemorial. Oskopnir. That which was not created, that not born, that which should never have existed. The emanation. It was once said that when the world was shrouded in black winter and dark flashes of lightning ruptured the heavens, the abyss would open, tearing the world apart. Demons enveloped the ice and cold, and would drain the world and feed on souls. Only those who had worshipped the cold and the dark shall rise to be masters, and given a seat by the ruler of this new world. The entity, or, as it is metaphorically known, the black sun, lets its darker light shine across the world. It gnawed the earth from the inside, killing it like a parasite. Like a frost wind, it swept across the plains, making them barren. Like a plague, it wormed its way into the hearts of living creatures. The gathered gods could do nothing to rein in the wrath, hate, and cold, which tried to force its way into Trudvang. The power of eons worth of pure evil, broke through the barriers created by the gods in an attempt to protect the world of order. Gods who had existed since creation were slaughtered. Sergurants lost their powers, and the 5 worlds were sunken into the cores when the entity radiated its evil, creating a catalyst to plunge Trudvang into the deepest darkness. In an attempt to overthrow the world order, the entity created the Snow Queen to counter the goodness embodied by the old gods. By conquering Trudvang little by little, her power would eventually become great enough to shake the foundations of that held worlds apart, making them collapse and crash into each other. If the dark side were to emerge victorious, it would mean the demise of the worlds of Blotham and Dimhol, and as they would crumble and meld with the world of mortals. The world of twilight would be thrown into chaos. Himmelhal would be destroyed. Pandemonium would break out and usher in the start of a new age, an endless dark age, without hope of light. The entity and the Snow Queen share a symbiotic existence. The Snow Queen, through her evil, makes the maelstrom grow, and the entity bestows upon her power. In the search for its twin soul, the entity birthed forth its emanation. She was the first creature forged from the dark energies, and so she was a part of the heart of the eclipse, the source from which the dark energy flowed, out across all the worlds. She was the tainted creation. She was the black ice. She was the Snow Queen. As the black ice grew and spread, so too did the Snow Queen's powers. The Snow Queen herself is an incorporeal manifestation. Hidden under the black ice which covers the northernmost of the great ice plains. The ice is both her home and her prison, as she is not able to escape its cold embrace in her original form. The Snow Queen is the dark goddess of lies, deceit, and malevolent oblivion. She is but a thought, a dream, a wind. Her seductive whispers, her greatest weapon. The spreading of the black ice, as it enables her to communicate with her zealous followers. Through blocks of black ice, she is able to spread the message of the black sun to lands her voice would not otherwise reach. The effects of the black ice's whispers and how they affect living creatures are described below. All right. Sorry. Anyone who is corrupted by the black ice will be forced to attempt... Oh, that's mechanics. Sorry. The Snow Queen's dreams are very seductive and always have a certain allure to them. She will not reveal her dark side at first, instead coming across as an imprisoned goddess. The first temptation in her arsenal is love, followed by powers of riches. There are no methods that the Snow Queen will not employ to ensnare a victim into becoming a bloodthirsty worshipper. The dream period varies from person to person. Some may only experience one night, while others may have to endure several weeks of dreams. Early stages of being an ice worshipper can almost be likened to a honeymoon period. The Snow Queen makes good on all her small, simple promises to her victim during this early stage. It could be something as simple as good luck, or love, or being simply and generally liked. At first, it will all seem like an innocent game, one where everyone's a winner. Her promises will quickly grow to incredible proportions. The Snow Queen will convince the person that she has a special plan, one that is just for them, as though it was the two of them against the world. Her image is unique for each and every worshipper, all to make each individual love her more. The morals of those bewitched will crumble with every step of the way, until there is no turning back. Then sacrifices become the only remedy. The Snow Queen will purposely ignore the pleas of her worshippers who have reached that stage, and if they do not sacrifice in her name, it is the only thing that means anything to her. In the end, there are no limits as to who is sacrificed. Family, friends, it does not matter. The only thing that does is that the Queen still loves them. It is only then that the worshippers will come to understand what they have become. But by then, it will be far too late. The Norim Elves. The gods were enraged by the living, who thought themselves as gods. Their arrogance and sloth would not go unpunished. Such was the decision of the gods. The verdict was they were to be forgotten and eradicated, brought down and beaten, never to rise again. They were to fail trial after trial, and the gods would turn their backs on them. They would be struck down by sorrow, cloaked by melancholy, and endless disappointments would be what followed, but followed more of the same. During the final phase, a dark, false queen would reign, and the people would perish. But this queen would bear a son, the last king. The king himself is lost to the darkness that is hate, but his yearning for love overpowers. The last one shall find him, and shall love him. She will, by fate, be born at the last hour, pure of blood, masked by darkness, and filled with light, and thus she shall be known. Her purity will dictate the future, and the choice must be hers, protected solely by her guide. With a heart of snow, she will meet her twin. When mother is confronted by daughter, the stars alone know the answer. The Norim elves were the proud descendants of the very first elves, and the word No Imlain means precisely the first. They were believed to descend directly from the gods, and were the offsprings of those that came down from the darkness of space. The Norim elves were proud, curious, and fearless, and were highly regarded by their cousins. The godly heritage was stronger in their blood than by those of other elves. That's why their lives were also much longer, retaining some of the trace of the now lost divine immortality. The Norim elves were as tall as humans and had very strong long limbs, without appearing grotesque or awkward like trolls. Their posture was graceful, and their facial features proud and beautiful. They did not really look down upon the other races, but they had a way about them which made them appear arrogant. Their curiosity abated as the years passed, but fear remained a foreign concept. The Norim elves' conflict with the gods stemmed from a time when the world was young, long before the gods left. The real reason for their break with their symbiotic relationship with the divine has been lost to time and is unknown to any living creature today. All Norim elves had long dark hair, black eyes, and silky white skin. They wore their hair in styles that far outshone that of royalty and adorned themselves with simple but majestic clothing. The Norim elves began to explore the world early on, and stood as the foremost champions of light amongst the darkness. They wished to break new ground and pave the way for other elves. However, in their impatience to see the world, they lost touch with their roots, and so the Norim elves were forgotten, and passed into myth, set before even the time of dreams, a time forgotten by the elves. Many years passed, and eventually even the Norim elves lost their wanderlust and settled, establishing a kingdom. Their high seat was situated among the mountain peaks in what is today known as Fjall, and the other tribes have spread into the nearby regions. There they lived comfortably throughout their prime, which lasted for thousands of years. The times would change with the rise of the Snow Queen, and the Norim elves would once more find themselves devoted to the war against the darkness. The Snow Queen appeared like a trial from the gods, a punishment for the Norim elves' idleness and arrogance. They felt the Snow Queen's dark powers, saw how the world was distorted, and quickly they resolved to imprison her. Through the use of powerful magic, the Snow Queen was once more laid to rest under the ice, in an artificial slumber, wherein she could no longer grow, only dream. The elves believed themselves to be immune to her corruption, and moved their entire kingdom to the freezing great ice plains, to act as the Snow Queen's eternal guardians. Unwilling to trust any other race, they made sure that the location of the Snow Queen's grave remained a secret to this day. The Norim elves lived peacefully in their new home for eons, and the world once more flourished. Even though a few of them succumbed to darkness, their kingdom withstood all external attacks. The fate of the world rested safely in the hands of the Norim elves, and so it was until that day when Princess Hilsinka was born. Today, no more than a handful of Norim elves survive, far too few to be able to sustain their once proud culture into the future. The Incarnation. For eons upon eons she slept, dwelling under the ice. For thousands upon thousands of cold winters She lays, prone, whispering to the ears that did not exist. The teeth of time gnawed and scraped at her soul in the dark shadows of the black ice. But evil does not freeze. The hate did not fade. Hungry flames burned in her heart, ready to eradicate anything in her path. The bitterness over her untimely imprisonment, when she had been so close to attaining her dream of being worshipped as a goddess, was so great that it crushed happy men and women far removed from where she lay shackled since time immemorial. Time allowed the powers of eternal darkness to evolve. Despite her dormant state, and the ice that surrounded her grew dark by the evil incubating in her cold, frozen heart. "3,333 years ago, the queen of the Norim elves unexpectedly gave birth to a daughter, Velsinka. This was strange, as the queen no longer had a husband. Something was wrong, and the princess was born evil, through and through, to her core. Simply put, Velsinka experienced hatred in a way that was so completely foreign to other elves. Her evil heart felt utmost disdain for all life. The only thing that gave her satisfaction was destroying anything that was whole and right. Her birth caused a powerful earthquake across all of Trudvang, causing great devastation. To this day, the catastrophe is still referred to as the Big Quake. From that day forth, the Snow Queen now exists in the divide between the physical and the non-physical worlds. Velsinka, the personification of hate, cold, and darkness, became the Snow Queen's incarnation. To antagonize the gods of light and tarnish their foremost creation, the Snow Queen was reborn in the body of a Norim elf. Despite having been trapped by elves, most powerful exorcists and Vintner weavers, the entity was able to keep its creature alive. And as the Snow Queen reincarnated, she found she could thaw her way out of her imprisonment. Velsinka and the Snow Queen were the same creature in every way, and now she was more powerful than ever. The elves who guarded her refused to believe that one of their own could be seduced by her alluring whispers. Despite being young, fatherless, the child whose origins were shrouded in mystery, the arrogance of the Norim elves would be their undoing. None would be able to come to their aid, as they were too proud to seek help. The Snow Queen had triumphed over her captors the moment she had been born into a living body. The moment her first breath, the moment she opened her eyes and realized that she held the love of her mother. One by one, Velsinka's older siblings all succumbed to accidents and disappeared without a trace. Though suspicions soon arose, there was nothing to be done, as the old elf queen loved her daughter above all else. Furthermore, the child possessed such a natural gift for magic that no one dared defy her. The only ones who could have faced her were loyal to the elf queen. By the time she was an adolescent, Velsinka had already mastered weaving the Vintner, and was in her studies submerging herself into the well of knowledge. She shunned the company of others, and her mother grew more and more depressed. Velsinka maintained contact with the entity, which rested in the depths through recurring dreams she had since her earliest years. She referred to it as her father, as it guided her through the challenges of youth and childhood, with a comforting inner voice. Her father protected her against any and all disaster, and Valsinka grew to be strong. Her father told her that she alone was the only elf chosen to ascend as a goddess and reunite with the old gods, but that her powers hailed from darkness. She was to connect with the darkness and rule alongside chaos. With the support of the entity, she would be given the power necessary to bring about the collapse of the world of order and plunge it into chaos and darkness. Norna the Wise was the queen of the Norum Elves and Valsinka's mother. She had, contrary to popular belief, been aware of what kind of creature her daughter was from the very beginning, but was unable to smite her own flesh and blood. Not even when the fate of the world was in the balance. In truth, Norna's heart was so pure that she was actually unable to hurt any living things, and yet she knew that something had to be done. Her dreams showed her what was to come. In the utmost secrecy, she summoned Kirjanti, her most loyal and faithful servant, and her father's closest friend. As she knew that the daughter of faith, that the daughter of faith could save the world if she was pure of heart. Blameless, free from sin, and filled with love, Norna asked him to perform the dark ritual on her. Kirjanti removed her beating heart, exactly as he had learned to do while held captive in Bludheim. And so, the heart and soul of Norna the Wise was rested in Kirjanti's hands in the shape of a precious stone, which was known as Snowsaga. Finally, she asked him to protect this treasure and hide it in a place where none would find it until the day when she once more would be reborn, an incarnation of herself into Trudvang's world. After Kirjanti left her an empty shell, she wrote her testament to the world, Norna's prophecy. She spent her last night alive watching the stars and the gods who languished far from the world in which she lived. She begged the gods for help, but received no reply. There we go. The following morning, when Valsinka unexpectedly arrived, Norna arranged for a grand party in her daughter's honor. Valsinka entered the large hall and coldly approached her mother and bowed before her. Then her cold hand shot out towards her mother as she clawed her way through the old queen's chest in search of her heart. The heart that was given, that heart that was to give Valsinka her mother's power, was missing. Full of wrath at being outwitted, Valsinka ripped apart the remains of the lifeless body, much to everyone's horror and despair. Kirjanti, who escaped Valsinka's claws with Norna's heart intact, wandered aimlessly through Trudvang alone, unable to trust a soul. As time passed, the heart had taken a new form, just as fair as Norna's bright soul, to become the most beautiful stone ever to exist, as white as snow, as smooth as her skin. The heart shone with her love like a sun, like a goddess captured in the stone of time of her own accord. The stone returned Kirjanti's hope and gave him the will to live, and because of that, he loved her. He was her guardian, and she was Snowsaga. She guided him and spoke to him. She loved him and sustained him. Never would he have envisioned her power to be so great. Maybe she had always been a goddess watching over them. Maybe that was why she had left them in their darkest hour, to make them understand. Kerjanti found refuge in Wildheart, far from Valsinka's eyes, and there in the mythic forest, lost in time, his life was unnaturally lengthened by the love with Snowsaga shared with him. Kerjanti's life now embraced centuries rather than just years, as the elves of old sagas did, long before the departure of the gods. Valsinka cheated out of the powers of Norna's heart that she believed to be hers by right, fled from the grand throne room, and spent the following years devastating the entire elven kingdom. Her evil powers raged at full force, and the hordes of bestiars, the Jutans, Tusirs, and trolls, whom she had lured with her silken promises, crushed her mother's elven kingdom, Poliolanta, the starry sky, within a century. Valsinka's power increased during the following millennia, although at a slower pace since Snowsaga was missing. With time, her greed had turned beyond the poor remains of Polianta, which now lied in the great ice plains. She bred a race of evil conquerors, the Orkir, and started what would later be called the Time of the Untamed in the Wildland. But not all hope was lost, since unexpectedly humans demonstrated their value. The Hogtorn brothers, the heroes of Wildland, found Kerjanti, who was hiding in Wildheart, the elf, listening to the Wildlanders' call, despite all horror, was able to overcome and capture Valsinka, using Snowsaga. She was brought back to the land far north, even beyond where the Hermtusirs dwell, never to be able to spread her evil through Trudvang again, or so they thought. Few at the time knew of Norna's prophecy. After the triumph, the might of the Hogtorn king disappeared, while Kerjanti went back into hiding in Wildheart as a silent keeper of Snowsaga, forgotten by the rest of the world. Today, 300 years have passed. With Norna's heart at her side, Valsinka, the Snow Queen, is slowly but surely starting to thaw. Kerjanti is dead, and Snowsaga is lost. The only remaining hope rests with the Child of Light and his companions. They must travel to the Black Ice to stop Valsinka before it is too late, before the Fimbulwinter reaches its 3rd year. Otherwise, Valsinka will use the Snowsaga as an instrument to ascend and become the goddess she was meant to be. Now, with her powers gathered, there is the possibility that she could succeed. She already displays the early signs of becoming a divine being. However, her body was not able to withstand the stress of the possession. Today, she exists in a state where she is neither living nor dead, but merely a form of dark energy. Her physical being is something between a demon and her original form. Valsinka is merging with the evil entity in the maelstrom, the origin of her life force. The thing is Valsinka, the thing is, Valsinka has no father. She is actually 2 entities. One part of her, the scared little elf girl who had her life taken from her, only to exist in the darkest corners of her subconscious. The other part is her as the incarnation of the Snow Queen. Valsinka will never understand the truth behind her volatile behavior, and to the outside world she appears highly unstable. Her true nature, inner conflict, and dark fate is a result of the battle raging between the 2 entities. Their game of chess, good versus evil, light versus darkness, order versus chaos. The birth of the Orkirs. Alone and forgotten, as if stuck in an endless nightmare, she lays frozen in a place under the ice, where her whispers for help couldn't even reach the wind, which whipped the barren plains above her. With the passing years, her grief and despair grew all the greater. She waited, hoping. Finally, she gained enough power to incarnate. The entity had kept her alive, dreaming and yearning. Now she could finally leave her prison. Having a body changed everything. Her former guards were taken as slaves by the trolls and giants that she summoned as her servants. It grew even worse when the demons came. The elves were, one by one, bound to the land of the black ice, on the freezing great ice plains, where they were tortured and tormented. The elves' souls experienced such pain in the dreadful cold that some of them transformed into dark creatures prior to their deaths. They fell from grace. The eternal cold turned their skin black and blue and blood red, and plunged their bodies into a deep slumber, whereby they were no longer in the world of the living. When the Snow Queen incarnated and became Valsinka, she was freed from her prison. The Norim elves were caught unaware. Having not foreseen her move, after Norna's fall, dark times awaited those left behind. These were dark days for the Norim elves, with Valsinka as queen, and all that was beautiful began to wither and decay. Valsinka kept the elves of Paleolanta in line with horrifying frost demons and disgraced Norim elves within the city walls. Hyrmtisirs and trolls waited eagerly just outside, and there were no other means of escape. The siege wore at the proud elves. They probably knew deep down that they were beyond salvation. Over time, Valsinka's patience with her people ran thin, and she betrayed the Norim elves by giving the Hyrmtisirs to the secret of conquering the city. An enormous army led by the Hyrmtisirs and supported by the Bastirs attacked, and alongside Valsinka's forces on the inside, left only a handful of the last remaining Norim elves alive. Valsinka even had the disgraced Norim elves murdered to complete the circle and obliterate the last of what had once been her own people. Those not immediately devoured by the black purgatory that swept through the city like a firestorm on the Farge wind were, on Valsinka's command, frozen into statues or left into the hands of the vengeful frost giants. The city was torn down to its foundations, and all that remained were mere ruins. Within a century, Valsinka had destroyed a city that had stood for eons. Today, the memory of Paleolanta only lives on in the dreams of the Norim elves, who escaped that faithful day 3,000 years ago. 1,000 years passed after Polyanta's The Starry Sky was destroyed. Valsinka, the Snow Queen, gradually began to reawaken the dead elves under the ice, tormented them, using demonic power to make their bodies writhe. Using the merciless torture of the black ice, she was able to create a dark race of warriors to serve her purpose. They were called the Orkir, or the Dark Ones, and they were reborn from a world which lies between ours and Blotheim. All Orkirs were given a drop of demon's blood, and for the sole purpose is to spread death and destruction about them. The black and blue shades of frostbite, their skin is hard and tough. Their arms are sinewy, strong, and muscular. their bodies resilient and immune to pain. They bore strong jaws with yellowing teeth protruding from them, and yellowing tusks protruding from them and from their mouths, and their eyes took on the same yellow shade as those seen in trolls. The Orkirs were great warriors, and a few brave souls who dared meet them in open battle quickly learned the meaning of true fear. Just as they had once been talented hunters, their target had now changed, and anything that the Snow Queen wanted to abolish became their prey of choice. They were cold-blooded, terrifying, and carvings of demon patterns on their skin depicted part of their origin story. The Orkirs served their purpose well, and when these warrior slaves were first summoned by the Snow Queen 300 years ago, they frantically hacked their way out of the black ice. They quickly spawned more offspring and swarmed out of the crevices of the dark ice. Within a few years, a large army made its way down from the great ice plains, forcing their way through the great iron mountains, column after column, an enormous host, all armed with heavy swords, pikes, and large iron shields. They waged open war against the free folk of the Stormlands. To ease the pain of frostbite, they tied ropes made of human hair into knots around their arms and bodies. They gathered under powerful banners, and the Ice Cult, the Wolves, the Hurim Trolls, the Hrimtisirs, all fought and lived alongside the Orkir throughout this first campaign, led by the Dark Ones. At the time, few knew who these creatures were or where they had come from, although their evil was apparent to all. Evil lay over Wildland like a dark hand. Enslaved and subjugated, neither the humans nor the dwarves nor the elves of the north could escape. The earth quaked and groaned under the black ice's armies. All this changed the very shape of the Wildland, and the land was like a festering wound, unable to heal. The dwarves of the great Iron Mountains, northeastern region, decided to close their ancient gates in order to block the path of evil. A last alliance of Fyrkals and of the north bravely fought on endless plains in the southern wildlands, in what came to be known as the Naganolga, the Last Stand. Both the great Fylkarl, Jorman Hagtorn, and the bearer of the mighty sword, Karajon, Salvigfrund Hagtorn, the loved one, perished. On his deathbed, Salgfrund passed the ruling blade to his youngest son, one of only 2 human survivors of that horrible battle. The tale of the Snow Queen's first attempt to control the Stormlands is a long one. There are countless stories of heroic deeds and bravery shown by those who faced this dark army. Fathers turned on sons, brothers faced off with sisters, and the Wildland was catapulted into war, which could have meant the death of all those that lived there. In the longhouses of the Wildland, you can still today hear battle songs telling the story of how 2 brothers, the last of their blood, with the help of the hired Hurim trolls, finally managed to push out and defeat many of the Orkirs from Idildun's windswept plains. Some, however, implied that this was merely a weak thrust by the Snow Queen, and that she hadn't yet shown her full hand. Others chimed in, saying the Wildland would, in time, come to fear the immense power of these Dark Ones. Slowly but surely, the Orkir passed from memory, and the wrath of the Snow Queen failed to manifest. For hundreds of years, following the war, Wildland's berserkers still hunted savage Orkir in the dark woods, but as the worshippers of the Ice Cult gradually disappeared, so did the dark memories of the Orkirs fade. Only in the northernmost regions did the Orkirs survive. They hid in the frozen holes of the black ice, waiting for a time when they would once again be able to sink their claws into the human world. History turned the page once again, and in the wildland the memory of the Orkirs passed into terrifying myths and legends from times of yore. In this, Snowsaga campaign. All right, so here's our characters. The time of the untamed. There are times when reality tears and falls apart, when time itself loses all meaning and new history is made. There are times when none can resist being tempted by dark powers, and in their overwhelming fight not to succumb, everyone is willing to kill anything that gets in their way. 300 years ago, the time of the untamed was such a time. A wave of evil wound its way through the wildlands, recruiting new followers. The years thereafter came to be so dark and so depressing that even today none dare speak of them. With the darkness came the ice cult. Light powers fought dark ones. The stormlands were aflame. The battle horns blared, the bowstrings whistled, and the ground ran red. The gods shut their eyes, the elves cried, the dwarves stood with bated breath. As the honorable Fylkjarl fought over the copper fields in the north and schemed against each other to increase their family's power, a poison spread across the wildland, a poison which to this day terrifies and strikes the people dumb. A dark cult of worshippers grew within, attacking the very foundation upon which wildland rests. The whispers from a queen and some large blocks of black ice brought from the north by frost giants were all the tools to make the worshippers kill everything that got in their way. Even the hardline strategies of the mighty warriors of the Order of the Iron Hand were unable to banish this darkness that settled over the wildland. Blood flowed in rapid rivers, and fires burnt higher and higher, while all the shadows of darkness grew longer. The Queen of the Black Ice elevated her followers to the status of kings and princes, and into their ears she whispered dark lies. She promised them eternal life and godly powers, but only to those who complied with her wishes. The powers of these whispers were so great that many wildlanders followed them blindly, only to awaken to find themselves eternally cursed to a life in a wake of shadows. This was a time when the wolves howled in hunger and bloodlust, an era when the sun hid behind scorched black clouds, and lost souls cried out as sisters and brothers betrayed each other under the somber light of the moon. More people were sacrificed under unnatural conditions than there were worms in the soil. Light fought the dark. It was the omen foretelling the end of the world. The dead outnumbered the living, and her whispers had been heard by far too many. They called themselves worshippers of the black ice, and their deity was Valsinka, the Snow Queen, to whom they left offerings both grand and bloody. The world would be plunged into darkness. The winter would reign, and the cold would be queen. In the end, the entire villages joined the ice cult, and all worshipped the Queen of Black Ice, who, through whispers and illusions, promised them eternal life at her side. Thus, 300 years ago, more than half the population of the wildland were worshippers of the Dark Queen and the black sun she represented. The ice cult had, in a short amount of time, spread across the entire expanse of the Stormlands. The followers howled, lusting for blood and sacrifices. Sacrifice was at the core of the cult's activities, and their sacrificial methods were virtually endless. slow hangings, gutting and flailing, cleaving, breaking a victim's back over large rocks, letting their victim be eaten alive by dogs. The cult allowed essentially anything that caused the victim extreme pain. While it is true that the Wildlands had a long history of sacrifice and offerings, the sacrifice of humans was rare. And even then, it was only ever thralls. But in the time of the Untamed, the sacrifices in the Wildlands were so extensive that entire homesteads could disappear if the worshippers were given free rein to accomplish their missions. In the oral history of the Wildlands, you can still hear tell of the times long ago when father turned on son, and of how when one family member joined the cult, they would brutally sacrifice their entire family to the new deity. After the Snow Queen's defeat on the plains of Idildun, the ice cults and their followers were mercilessly hounded across the Stormlands by the most devoted warriors of the Iron Hand, those from Pater's own guard. Many of the followers met violent deaths when they refused to be converted. Others were immediately beheaded without question. The ice cults and their followers gradually passed into history. Their dark past was unlocked into the murky archives of history, the murky archives of history, banned forevermore. Angry and overthrown, denied and forgotten, a small sliver of the cult lived on. In a few of the most isolated and desolate areas of the Wildland, the cult would meet once a year to reminisce about their former glory and make sacrifices to a queen whose silky smooth whispers had ceased. The people had sacrificed themselves to the approaching creature of dark evil, meant to be the omen ushering in the world's end, but it was a high price to pay, and the currency was blood. The losses could even be measured by history. They couldn't be measured by history. It was a time when humanity had its life crushed out of it, a time of evil, a darkness of hatred. And yet, the powers of light had triumphed over the darkness. The human folk had finally conquered the bloodthirsty ice cult worshippers, and their endless hordes of light-impoverished people brought forth from their own world, between Blotheim and their own. The people whose eyes smoldered with hate and hunger, and whose blood was as black as the demons, showing bravery was to be immortalized in battle songs. The gathered forces of the Stormlands were able to stop Valsinka's, the Snow Queen's, entry into our world, and thereby prevent the apocalypse. Aided by Kirjanti and Snowsaga, they were able to fetter the entity's first emanation and its incarnation, Valsinka, far up in the kingdom whence they once came. The last king. 300 years ago, before the war broke out for real, Valsinka attempted to weaken the Wildlanders by allowing the Ice Cult to infiltrate all key positions of society. That was when she first discovered Orvar, the Beheader. Orvar lived with his family on a cape outside of Virkard, the city which had become a major hub due to the new copper finds. The copper rush led the greedy Wildlanders straight into the grasp of the Snow Queen and her cult. Orvar made his living extracting tar and coal in the 20 or so coal mines in the area, but he was also the executioner of the Hogtorn kings of Wildland. Orvar was an evil man, with more than 500 souls on his conscience, far more than his reputation suggested, some innocent and others guilty. Orvar murdered, raped, and maimed for amusement, simply because he took pleasure in it. Nobody was safe from him, and none dared to cross him. Orvar took advantage of his ties to those who ruled the wildland, and thereby became an icon of the kingdom. Many who wrote of him had never even met him, but were ordered to record him as a legend, and thus create a folk hero of sorts, or even a king, which of course he never was. Things were good for Ovar until Valsinka first took notice of him. Never before had she heard of such an evil man with such a tarnished consciousness, almost akin to her own dark soul. She tracked him down to see it for herself, if the rumors were true, and did not find herself disappointed. Ovar raped her out of his cape, and Valsinka allowed it to happen, to see if he was evil as she had hoped. Beaten and violated, Valsinka then revealed her true identity and her future plans, but Ovar dismissed her as a pathetic liar, out only to save her own skin. Never one known to have a good temperament, Valsinka could not contain her fury and unleashed the full extent of her powers upon him and his unfortunate family. The firestorm which followed was truly horrendous, and the disappointment Valsinka experienced when Ovar begged for his own life and that of his family was absolute. She spared Ovar, but slaughtered his entire family right in front of him. Then he was forced to, in the most humiliating of ways, plead for his own life. Some know that Ovar made a pact with a demon to be spared. Only Ovar himself knows that when he sold his soul to Valsinka in exchange for his own life, she also cursed his entire bloodline. Ovar would serve her eternally for the rest of his pathetic life, like the dog he was. Valsinka cursed him with warg sickness, an affliction making his mood change with the phases of the moon, and when he had transformed, giving her control of his instincts as well. Among his victims, Valsinka chose those dear to Ovar, the few people he truly cared about. Ovar, for his part, took a wife and managed to have 3 children before he died, a melancholic and broken man. Ever since, the affliction has lived on, latent in all of his line, and many had been forced to leave their family for long stretches of time to keep those dear to them safe from the predatory instincts brought on by the moon. The Ovar family was still the smallest in Verdgard, but their position as executioners was never questioned and has passed down through the generations. Even to this day, the oldest member of the Ovar clan acts as the Verdgard's judge and executioner. Valsinka's encounter with Ovar resulted in a son, whom she named Hakka, hate. As a reminder of what she felt for him, she felt no joy over the birth because she did not want Ovar anymore. But despite her hate, she could not find it in herself to kill the child. Conveniently enough, she met a ranger named Gall Grim. On her travels, she tricked him into believing that she was deathly ill and convinced him to take the baby. The only thing she told of the child's background was that his name was Hakka, and that he was a Norim elf, one of the last of his kind. Gull therefore named the child Hakka Norim. However, Gull realized that something was wrong with the child early on, and took the boy to a soothsayer. The soothsayer said that thick royal blood ran through Hakka's veins, and that he had a very special feature, watched over by the gods. The story shocked Gull, who grew obsessed with finding Hakka's true ancestry. He traveled with pomp and grandeur, scouring the lands in hopes of finding the kingdom which was missing its heir. This pursuit cost him more than half of his wealth. However, the search came to the attention of the surviving Norim elves. They had made their way far out to the west, to the mythical city of Yarankiling, and had been welcomed there, albeit with some suspicion, without having to divulge their true origins. There, they were able to study the prophecies which were linked to the events unfolding. By sheer coincidence, the rumors reached them of a man who claimed to be traveling with a son of a Norimian king. They knew that they would never be able to preserve the Norimian race, as they were far too few and finally merged with the other elves or die out. But they realized that their final legacy to the world would be to bestow upon Haka a daughter. She would be their true queen, whose fate it would be to make a choice with consequences that would be felt throughout the world. Gull's search never yielded anything. He turned bitter. Haka, who had always loved the man he thought to be his father, was singled out from his siblings and began being treated badly. As a mere 8-year-old, he ran away from his family and into the forest, never to return. The Norim elves missed their chance by mere months and began the long search for him, and thus the last king was lost, just as the prophecies had foretold. At the same time, Valsinka began to wonder what had become of her offspring, and visited Gull with the intention of bringing her son home. When she heard of what had happened, she cursed Gull and announced that his family would die before his eyes, that he would never again summon the energy to create a new family, instead being forced to rot away alone. Gull's family dropped like flies in front of him, and the new women in his life bore no children. Horrified that he would die without an heir, he adopted a son in all secrecy and thereby eluded Valsinka's curse, a secret which was kept for over 300 years. Haka made his way to Vurtgard, where he started a family. Primarily, he bought a slave woman and took them as wives, slave women. His sorrow and hate gradually grew as his children and wives aged, and in front of his very own eyes passed on, while he himself showed no real signs of significant aging. He also carried within him a hate for the world for having abandoned him. One of the last surviving Norim elves, Lim, ransacked Trudvang in search for the last royal son. Maybe the truth is that Haka found her rather than the other way around. Haka, who was at that point met his real mother a handful of times, had begun to understand that something in his blood granted him a longer life, and that all stemmed from his elven ancestry. Unfortunately, he did not know how to contact other elves, and his mother had forbidden it. Now his sons had captured a woman wandering alone in the forest and brought her to Vurtgard as a slave. Despite them having beaten her something awful, she was still unbelievably beautiful. As soon as Haka laid eyes on her, there was no doubt in his mind as to what race she hailed from. He loved her at first sight. When Haka haltingly stuttered a few words in the forgotten language of the Norim elves, Lin realized she was the one who had been chosen to fulfill the promises of the gods. She had found the last king. A year later, Lin bore a child and named her Maria. Maria grew up in Vurtgard, protected from Valsinka's evil eye by Lin, and doted on by her father. Lin reverently addresses Haka as "my king," as with time she had grown to love him. She understands that his good qualities outnumbered the bad, and she blames his mother for most things. In Lin's eyes, her role to save Haka from the dark side. She also noticed the guilt that passed across Haka's face each and every time he looks at her. By playing on his feelings, she hopes to rid him of his darker qualities. Her cunning has worked so far. Haka has almost not dared tell his mother about Lin, as his love for them, his love for her was far too great. Haka's descendants are known as the Norims, not to be confused with the Norim elves. Even if the Norims are in many ways kin to the Norim elves, their elvish blood is too thin for them to be considered elves or even half-elves. In appearance, the two races of people share a lot of similarities, and the Norims still carry the distinctive features of the Norim elves. All right, and then we get to the history of the Wildlands. I think that's all of the, this is a lot of vegetation and geography. Let's see if we have any other character and the arcs. Oh, that might be it for tonight. Sorry, it's not as long as I thought. Yeah, this is the introduction to the adventure. Let's see. Yeah, we can end with this. Yeah, because this will get into the adventure, so it'll introduce characters and storyline that would spoil it if it does get adapted to Dragonbane. It would be a shame. But this background, I think, is harmless and helps the setting anyway. So let's read just a little bit more of the Snowsaga adventure introduction, and that will be it for tonight. It was the dawn of time, when the sun's warming rays thawed the earth for the very first time, and the gods delighted over their creation. It was a time when our world was beautiful. In this divine moment, something was born in the darkest depths of the sea, the black sun. That which had lain hidden for so long, that which had been tethered to a place that did not exist. The waves on the seas raged and surged. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Like an open wound, straight to our world, something out there waited, gathering strength. The world would never be the same again. The sky darkened and was eclipsed. The world turned gray and barren. The wind swept its frozen veil over the flat lands, and in our hearts hate was conceived. One of the rays of the black sun awoke her from her slumber in the black ice, where she lays buried. Dreaming, yearning, her whispers slowly drift in the wind. Time was her only enemy, and long her wait became. Then it came, the day when she was called upon. The darkness was so great that none could ever stop her. Nothing could other than Snowsaga. But just as victory was close at hand, the winds turned and defeat stood knocking on the door. That which was not supposed to happen had, and the Snow Queen had once more been forced into her deep slumber. Disappointed and embittered over her fate, she lays under the ice again. Her tears turned the already dark ice black. The hate dwelled deep within her frozen heart. 300 years passed, and then she found him, the child of darkness. For he had found her. Unaware of his fate, he had followed her whispers and searched for her desperately, day and night. All he craved was for her to love him. If he could give her Snowsaga, victory would be hers, and nothing would get in the way of her return. With little hope of success, she opened the portal to the forest for the frostbitten giant. The enchanted forest hid that which she hated above all, the Snowsaga. Despite her lacking confidence in him, Bludaga managed to reunite her with Snowsaga and kill the elf who had been its eternal guardian. The time is nigh for the return of the Snow Queen, setting in motion events planned by the dark powers which have been brewing since the dream and the dawn of time. The Snow Queen would be the catalyst, setting off a chain of events that would lead to the end of the world. Gradually, the omens prophesizing the beginning of the end start to take shape. Suddenly, old prophecies no longer seem absurd, and the end of the world no longer as distant. The hope of the world now rests with the child of light and the daughter of faith, as well as with the brave souls who chose to follow their path. But not even their love is strong enough to banish the darkness this time, and sometimes fate plays a little trick on life so that the pieces no longer fit. All right, I think this is into the adventure. Yes. Oh, spoilers. Yeah, I hope we get to see all of this art again in a Dragonbane supplement. Yeah, look at this. This is the big mistake we made. Remember, Bludaga was dead on his throne. We touched the sword, and he was reincarnated by the fungus. Oh, nice. Yeah, it looks like that. The whole story from the board game. Let's see. Oh, is this, oh, here's a little epilogue. So after the story, I think we'll do this as the last piece. Yeah, so after, if you'd like to check the playlist of that whole long tale that played out in about 30, if you've got an extra 33 hours to watch. But here's the epilogue of the Snowsaga adventure. Many of the lands of Trudvang struggled through a tough, merciless winter. Hopefully the hero's deeds have triggered the onset of a warming spring, which thaws the evil and heralds the start of a new age. Despite these heroic feats, one major task remains: crushing the last of the Snow Queen's underlings, who have really sunk their claws into the Stormlands. Thus the war will continue for a while, before passing into memory. All right, the Iron Elves will gradually begin to disassemble their Iron Tower. The truth was written in the stars, but they were only able to interpret it using a very complicated instrument. For part of their history, some had caught a glimpse of the true face of evil, but were never able to explain it to anyone in Voltoris. The price they had paid for helping the guardians and guides of the prophecy was that they were cast out and disavowed by their own. Many thought it was dearly bought, but eventually the side of good won. Without the Iron Elves, the heroes would never have been able to finish their mission. So what is happening in the Stormlands? What is going on with the friends? Okay, and this is just a bunch of questions. Sorry. So let's see here. The Snow Queen was an emanation of the Black Sun. However metaphorical that may seem, there is a dreadful truth lurking behind the words. What kind of entity was it that put such dark forces into motion? How could such a force have fit into our world? Where would a place be in that case? Where is Oskperin, the realm of the entity? Yes, so this is like summing up everything. Oh, it wasn't as much of a summary as possible. It's just kind of resetting the... yeah, it doesn't end the story. So yeah, it just asks questions about all the characters. Okay, sorry. I thought there was a little bit more story to ease us out. But yeah, this is all of the all of the campaign. So yes, check out that playlist for Trudvang Legends, and this will give you some idea of what that setting and what the that end of the world was more about. They also added on a fight with a dragon at the end, which I think there may be something similar. I think they changed it a little bit, but here I'll give you a little peek of this. I thought this was a nice piece of art. At the end, there was a... was that in the other book? There was a worm at the end, kind of an albino dying worm that was pretty gruesome looking. Yep. The defeat of Blue Dog. Oh yeah, no, it's not in this book. Okay, well that is going to do it for Snowsaga. So this gives you kind of the setting and the origins of the eras that lead up to the point where you're trying to protect the Snowsaga and use it to stop the end of the world and the second attempt of the Snow Queen's return. All right, so yeah, we'll be back again tomorrow night. I think we'll move on to the next expansion, which was the dwarves, and we'll do the more detailed background for Muspelheim and the origin of the dwarves and then the different dwarven cultures. So maybe that'll be fun. We'll have to see. All right, so I hope you enjoyed a little bit of background on Snowsaga. If you haven't watched the board game or haven't played the board game, this will give you a little bit more enjoyment. The background in here gives you a little bit more enjoyment for the basis for that adventure. Yeah, I wish they could have gone a little bit more. You see some games that have a book where you're reading from that have nice history and introductions, and I think they cut that down in Trudvang Legends, but it's in here, and hopefully we're going to get a Dragonbane version of it. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you want to see how they used 5e to run this, so that we can take guesses about how Dragonbane will run in this setting with all of these many peoples. All right, well, that'll do it for tonight. We'll be back again tomorrow night with some dwarfiness, the Muspelheim, the strongholds under the earth, and we will see you then. Thanks for listening. Thank you to the patrons and members, and happy holidays. I hope you can find some time to enjoy this when you're also dealing with all the holiday stress. So see you again soon. Goodbye.